My name is Eric Pauly, and I'm running for City Council's General Seat A.
All right, so tell us a little bit about Eric.
I was born here in Springfield. My family's history goes back over 150 years here in the area. Most recently, I was the president of the Phelps Neighborhood Association for 6 years, and I currently sit on the city's Planning and Zoning Department. I've been doing that for now 3 years.
I want to ask you about that. I know I was aware of the P&Z board position. You've done that for several years, as you mentioned. What have you learned in that capacity that would qualify you to be on City Council?
Bringing a whole lot of that information forward, and that's institutional knowledge, obviously, that I have of working not only with the Neighborhood Association, but with the Planning and Zoning Commission. So much of what City Council takes a look at actually comes through Planning and Zoning first. And keep in mind, we act as an advisory commission to City Council, where Council will generally take a very broad look at many things across the spectrum. With the Planning and Zoning Commission, we have a very focused look at what's going on, but our look tends to be much, much deeper. So bringing forward that type of experience to the City Council, I think, is very important.
So you specifically, why do you want to be on City Council?
I see a lot of what has gone on in our city, and I got to thinking about something that somebody told me here recently, that in order to get more people involved, we need to build a bigger table. And I understand their point, but it's not one that I completely agree with. I look at it a little bit differently. I think that what we need to do is we need to make sure that all the stakeholders currently have a spot at the table itself. My concern would be that by creating this larger table that's been put forward, that those who occupy so much of the table right now would just take much more real estate. So I think there's a lot that goes on within our city that our citizens aren't heard and aren't listened to, and I want to bring that forward. We see a lot of that within our neighborhoods in Springfield, and that's why I think that we see so much conflict that goes on right now that we could avoid if we had those voices coming to the table and earlier.
That kind of leads me to my next question. Obviously, Springfield doesn't face a lot of the same issues that other major cities in Missouri may face, but in your perspective, what are some of the biggest issues facing the Queen City?
Obviously, we've got some problems with our housing, and when you talk about housing, it's a pretty broad spectrum. We've got the unsheltered population. We've also got renters who have problems with some of the landlords that we have out there. And then that we also have people who want to get into actually owning their own property, but right now they're not able to. And I think that those are three legs of that stool that really need to be addressed. The other one is going to be economic opportunity here within the city of Springfield. I view this area as being much more of a broader area than just the city itself, much like Northwest Arkansas has done, where they look at the entire economic area. I think that Springfield and Southwest Missouri really needs to do a much better job with that.
There's been some conflict between residents, city council to an extent, but mainly about developments. We had a situation 3 or 4 years ago with the Galloway apartment development that went to a citywide vote. The National Sunshine Saga, as some refer to it, it's been 2-3 years now. Is there a way, is there a compromise, is there a solution? Neither side in either of these situations, whether it's the neighborhoods or the developers, seem to want to budge, or at least they try to compromise, but no agreement has been made. Do you see a solution, or is this something that, you know, how would you approach it?
I think there can be a solution out there, and again, it gets back to my previous point that I believe that all of the stakeholders need to be involved at a much earlier point within that discussion itself. Unfortunately, right now, the way that things are structured is that if a developer brings something forward that the neighborhood wasn't aware of, they don't know about it until pretty much the last minute. They usually get about a 2 weeks notice, that there may be a proposed zoning change for that particular piece of property. The other thing that you have to keep in mind at that point is that with developers, they have people on staff that this is their job to actually look at the paperwork, to deal with all these things that go on. When it comes to the neighborhood level, that you have people who are volunteering their time. They're not paid for this. but what they're concerned about is what type of impact is that going to have on their neighborhood. And I think that if we were to get those groups together much, much earlier, we would have much more success with things. I often look at the type of development that we have here in Springfield, and I always go back to, we need to make sure that we're not only addressing what our issues are today, but are we setting ourselves up for future success? Is it something that the next generations will be able to go ahead and build off of? Or are we just dealing with the problem right now today? And I think that we need to take a little bit deeper look sometimes at some of the things that we do within the city of Springfield.
As a member of the Planning and Zoning Board running for City Council, is there anything as difficult as trying to balance a potential development with economic vitality versus concerns of the neighborhoods it's going in?
It's always a tight one to walk. Yes, it is, because there's so much information, first of all, that comes to you, which I'm very grateful for. I'm able to go ahead and take a look at whatever our planning and zoning packet includes, which may be up to 400 pages of information. Then at that point, we have the developers come before us, we have any of the other stakeholders come before us, and to me, that's always very important, is to be able to hear from those different people. I feel like I know the city of Springfield pretty well. Again, born and raised here. I've lived in all 4 different zones within Springfield, but occasionally something will come up where I have to go out to a particular location just to refamiliarize myself with that. Once I do that, then hearing from those stakeholders who that's their daily life, that's where they live, then I have a much better idea of how this might impact. Also looking at what the developer has in mind to see, is this something that I would consider to be intelligent development? Or is this just development that's piggybacking on what other people have already built within that area, and they want to come in and just reap the rewards from that?
Do you have any endorsements that voters should know about?
At this point, other than more than doubling the number of signatures that were required for my petition to get actually on the ballot, no, I don't. And my wife has asked me about that, and she said, how do you feel about it? And I said, it doesn't change what I want to do, and it doesn't change my focus. Because to me, the real important thing is the voters themselves. Having those endorsements, very nice to have. But again, at the end of the day, this is about the citizens of Springfield. And that's who I am concerned about.
Another issue I want to talk about is something that just passed City Council. The license tag ordinance, and there's this debate amongst many residents in Springfield. I'm assuming, correct me if I'm wrong, if elected, you may not be able to do much about it, that it's already passed. But a similar issue may come up in the future where there's so much divisiveness in the situation. You've got one hand that is, I believe it's Councilman Hosmer that's talking about lost tax revenue, cars on the roads, lack of insured drivers, lack of properly registered vehicles. And then you have the other side of people arguing that it's what they would deem a poor tax, and if you can't afford things, you're just stacking penalties upon penalties and you're putting people further in the hole. If you were on council and that ordinance was able to be voted upon, how would you vote on it?
I think I would have approached it a little bit differently. I've always looked at this as being something that maybe those taxes should be included in the final price of the vehicle itself, that would allow a purchaser to go ahead and actually wrap that up within their monthly payments. And I think that if we had approached it that way, that would have put us on the right track in order to go ahead and do something else down the line. So I think at this point it was too large of a jump to get there, but I understand the reasoning behind it. So I would have looked at it a little bit differently, included it in the final price of the vehicle itself. That way you buy from a car lot or one of the dealers in town, it's already included within what you can take out on loan for a car.
And then I think my last one is simply, why should people in Springfield vote for you?
I'm going to go back to a little bit of my family's history on that one. My grandfather, between about 1910 and roughly 1940, he was an architect, a developer, and also had his own construction company here in Springfield. There's a lot of the things that we still have in Springfield that he had built that went ahead and took care of the needs at that time but we see they're being repurposed today. If you look at the original Reps Dry Goods down on the square, which is now Missouri Health and Human Services Building, he built that. He built Jarrett Junior High School. He built Roundtree Elementary School, Teft Elementary School, original fire stations 3 and 4, the Greene County Jail, on and on and on. Because he was able to go ahead and build that stuff and actually have his hands into the development and building of the city, his skill set is not something I have. I'm not a carpenter, I'm not a mason, but I am a community builder. And that's something that I have worked with within our community, within my own neighborhood, and also the Planning and Zoning Commission, where you hear many different voices, and you've got to figure out what is going to be the best path forward for everybody. You're not going to get 100% of everything you want, but what's the best path forward for us right now, and what sets us up for the future?
Is there anything that you would like to add about you, your campaign, anything that I did not ask about?
At this point, just remember that so much of this really comes down to the voter itself and what type of representation do you want. Currently, again, I do sit on the Planning and Zoning Commission. So on that commission, just like City Council, I sit at the same location that they do. I use the same computer systems that they use. I also use the same voting systems that they use. And I can understand where some may see this particular position, which is a voluntary position, as being something that you just don't get yourself too ingrained with. That's not the tack that I take with it. When this information comes forward to me, that I dig into it. I want to know everything that I possibly can about it before I actually get into the meeting. Once I get into the meeting, then I want to hear from the stakeholders. At that point, then I can make my judgment as to what I think is going to be the best. So it's a matter of being engaged within the community itself, being able to ask questions of people, being able to go ahead and offer solutions, and going forward with what we have available out there.